And now I'll pass the floor directly to Aengus to highlight the novelties or lack thereof, in a sense, of the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Madam Ambassador, thank you so much for your words. Mona, thank you so much for yours and for the support that you've spoken of the Office of the High Commissioner. It's absolutely incredible how this has moved over the years and is moving and will continue to move, as you have said. As the co-author of this report with Lucas, Paulo Itabori, as Renato has said, from Brazil, I'm really pleased to be able to give you some data from the report. First of all, I'd like to say that since the first report in 2006, as you mentioned, where there was 92 countries as criminalizing states, there are now 76. And in that period, as well as before then, with the immense work that advocates have been doing, the scope and the volume and the effectiveness of LGBT advocacy has evolved at all levels of discourse, in some regions more than others. And we hope to capture some of these developments here. Brazil's 2003 initiative at the Human Rights Council was the first concerted formal effort to include sexual orientation within the mandate of that body, which eventually resulted in the two resolutions that you've spoken of. And that is work continuing. That ILGA has moved to Geneva speaks to the relevance of this work and the meaning of embracing international human rights law as an advocacy tool to securing very real change in repressive and hostile states. As described in André de Plessis, our UN manager's article in the report, there are now large strides being made regarding sexual orientation and gender identity at all levels of the UN. This is really to be watched. Now many national and regional human rights and judicial mechanisms and most international human rights bodies consider sexual orientation and gender identity, which I'll refer to as SOGI, as cognizable. That is, as falling within the scope of their mandates in the same way that race, sex, or religion does. So it's not LGBT rights, it's human rights for LGBT people. This is a huge distinction that is emerging. Interestingly, as discussed in our document, in an article in our document by our colleagues at the Sexual Rights Initiative, the intersections of sexuality politics with economic or other social phenomena such as gender or race are increasingly coming into these discourses. This intersectional analysis provides for a more nuanced, reality-based experience of our exclusion and what it looks like and what the denial of rights look like. And it provides a more elaborate ways of describing our experiences. So as regards this report, the methodology, first of all, just to mention, was to look at existing laws. This is a report that is primarily looking at legal situations regarding to sexual orientation, not regarding we're just limited in this to sexual orientation because there is so much going on in the transgender field. That is another publication altogether. And it is something that ILGA hopes to work on with colleagues in the future. But just to say that as our methodology here is looking at existing law as codified on the statute books, even if not yet brought into force. We communicated with various individuals within the 1,100-strong membership of ILGA, and we communicated with legal authorities in academia and people in legal practice to clarify information. I'd just like to mention that we're particularly thankful to connect with Hossein Alizadeh from ILGA Herc to clarify some unclear information from the Middle East region. In this light, we calculate that currently in 2015, in 117 UN member states, there are no criminal sanctions prescribed for reasons of sexual orientation. However, in 14 of those states, an unequal age of consent pertains between same-sex and different-sex partners. Within virtually all of the states of the 76 that currently do criminalize same-sex sexual acts by one name or another, be that sodomy, be that buggery, be that unnatural acts, some LGBT advocacy exists at the ground level, and some it's very strong advocacy. Too often, this advocacy results in fatal results. It's notable, however, that, and as documented in the report, that in some of these states, efforts at sensitization of the media, of judiciary, of police, of prison services are underway, or at least promised, in the UPR, the Universal Periodic Review system that you have spoken about. So we have criminalizing states who are agreeing to enact or include LGBTI individuals in the scope of their work. Of course, as we've all said, the push is always on for the actual implementation of these. And we note the function within the Universal Periodic Review, the follow-on function of the mid-term implementation assessment that happens between reviews. It is a very useful advocacy time, and we would note that for monitoring and for holding states accountable to their commitments in preparation for coming back into these chambers at the UN. Of course, legislative repeal and reform is the gold standard in criminalizing states, and so it was good to see that in 2014, Palau decriminalized sodomy, and Mozambique repealed Articles 70 and 71 of its penal code concerning acts against nature, unquote. On the other hand, repressive laws in the Gambia, in Nigeria, and a new 2014 criminalizing code in Chad regarding same-sex sexual relations are significant setbacks. So just to speak now, just a small amount about the death penalty as it exists in the world today. And we've broken this down in a particular way, and I'll try to communicate that very clearly now and very concisely. Due to certain interpretations of religious doctrines, we calculate that 6 countries actually implement the death penalty. 5 of these officially on their books, which is Mauritania, Sudan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen. And Iraq is the 6th country, and we include it here because rogue judges and militias arrest, try, and execute people perceived to express their sexual orientation in ways considered forbidden. Now, I'm speaking about the entire country of Iraq at this moment in time, and I will speak a little bit further about the ISIS-held areas. In 3 further UN states, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Qatar, the death penalty is on the statute books. It exists, it is there, but appears not to be activated directly towards same-sex sexual relations. In late 2016, Brunei Darussalam will activate the death penalty on their books, but again, like these 3 states, it does not look like they will actually implement it. Such is our information. In the Daesh or ISIS-held areas of northern Iraq and Syria, the situation for same-sex love and expression is brutal and frightening. It is unforgiving, and it is one can't speak about it. It's for the horrors that are currently being reported. In the provinces, 12 northern states of Nigeria and in southern Somalia, we also have the death penalty enacted. So much like religion, notions of how to retain a state's traditional values also are justified by arguments about sovereignty of states and what a state's sovereign rights are. And here we see legal vehicles being deployed to stop the discussion of SOGI-related issues in the public space. In the 2013 Russian propaganda law, that is very famous, but that extended to very similar laws in Lithuania, Algeria, and Nigeria in 2014. However, happily, and we're talking about the progresses that happened, in 2013 it looked like a further 11 states were contemplating such propaganda laws. And it is great to report that actually, in fact, in 11 other states, nothing has happened on the books, on the statute. So that's a very strong positive from what it could be. So really, finally, I suppose another pillar of LGBTI advocacy in both criminalizing and non-criminalizing states is that overarching principle of non-discrimination on account of SOGI. And the fullness of this is still to be realized. The fullness of non-discrimination is still to be realized in virtually every state on the planet. Again, echoing what you were saying about the public response in Brazil and other countries. And again, this is true in some states more than others. So, for example, in 63 states in 2015, regulate discrimination based on sexual orientation in employment, while a further 7 have a constitutional overarching constitutional bans on discrimination. So there's, as you can see from that, that's 70 states. And there's much practical policy work to be done in this regard for LGBTI advocates and our allies, even in the most LGBTI accommodating of countries. Just to say about marriage and relationships, a relationship provision, it's still very thin on the ground in the world. We have 18 states on the books that allow for marriage. 2 of those are to be enacted in 2015 and 2016. But we have, so 18 states allowing for marriage equalities legally, and we have further 16 states providing some protections for partnership. Some of those look like they will move into marital, like in my own country, in Ireland, where we are having a constitutional referendum in a couple of days' time, on the 22nd of May, which might bring us marriage if we're lucky. So, you know, the incremental approach you're speaking about does have some weight. Obviously, America, the USA, is bucking this trend with extraordinary developments in 2014, where 18 more states within the United States allowed, and the District of Columbia allows for full marriage equality. We're conscious, and just to echo really what people are saying here, is that we are really conscious that legal recognition and the changing of law represents only one side of LGBT advocacy. Exactly as Mona was saying, changing attitudes is what these laws are helping, and the changing attitudes are helping to change the laws. So we have this symbiotic relationship. We're conscious that the legal recognition and changing law represents only one side of LGBT advocacy in the world, and as such the report contains 5 really excellent short overview essays, which are not more than 2,000 words each long, but well worth reading, because these are given to us by legal experts in the continents, and they really do provide some deeper cultural context to these legislative and jurisprudential developments that are happening. So on that note, I'd like to say thank you very much to you all for being here and for launching this report with us. We're very proud and very pleased to have it out. And thank you very much for your presence.
Thank you very much, Aengus, and thank you and Lucas for the excellent work done this year. And it is worth mentioning 2 things. On one hand, a lot of the kind of legislation mentioned by Aengus in its exposition right now are somehow synoptically represented on the map that you can see on your back, and that is usually the map we publish in conjunction with the report every year. But the second very important thing to say is that also this report and the map are possible not only thanks to the expertise and hard work of Aengus and Lucas, but also because, of course, we are fortunate enough to have a sufficiently broad membership base which provides us with important contacts on the ground in each country that can indeed help us in verifying, in updating our records in terms of the legislation of all the countries.